To get today's Q&A started, my name is Jessica and I am the Director of Programming at Afro-Vegan Society. And I'm here today with our amazing, dedicated Executive Director, Brenda Sanders. She is also the co-founder of the Greener Kitchen and the Thrive Baltimore. And she is the CEO of Plant Bliss Foods. And we're just so excited to be here today. Brenda, I'm really excited to have this interview with you, this discussion about animal agriculture and environmental racism in marginalized communities. So, with that said, is there anything you want to say before we get started?
Um, yeah, thank you, Jessica, for engaging with me on this because oftentimes I am the moderator or I'm the interviewer. And so it's nice to be on the other side of that and to be able to give some thoughts and perspectives. So thank you for doing this and thank you for folks who are tuning in.
Wonderful. Okay, so we have some great questions today. Brenda's doing amazing community activism work. And so I just want to hop right into the first question to help folks who may not be familiar with Brenda's work get to know her a little bit better. So, Brenda, your work is focused around creating a sustainable and accessible plant-based food system. What are some of the ways that our current food systems negatively impacts our environment?
Oh, wow. So many. This could be like an entire talk, to be honest.
Mm.
I like to focus on what I call animal-based food systems, because that's basically what our food system is. It's based on the use of animal products as the main source of food, and it's the most extractive and polluting source of food that we currently have uh, here on the planet today, which we'll talk about a little more as this program goes on. And so I try to focus on like what the extreme issues are around the animal-based food system. And one of the biggest issues, aside from just all the health concerns of eating animal products, of which there are many, but the biggest concern is the polluting and damaging effect of our food system on the environment and on our ecosystems, and on communities. And so and a lot of times we folks who are engaging with this particular kind of food justice work, and environmental justice work, we focus on the rural communities of color, because many people don't know the rural communities of color are really, really suffering greatly from industrialized animal agriculture. And so, just the huge industrialization of animal food production, the huge scale of it is causing, just exponentially more problems than ever before on the planet. And so these industries that build these huge industrial facilities, they need somewhere to build it. You need a lot of land in which to build a facility that may be housing, anywhere from 1,000 or 2,000 animals to like 30,000. You need facilities, you need a place to put all that waste product. You need a lot of land in order to produce, to raise and to raise animals and produce meat at that level. And so, it's not like we have a whole lot of land just left with all the, just development that we've done, especially here in the U.S. And so they need to find, these big swaths of land in which to build these facilities. But you can't just go into anybody's community and build these facilities. You have to go into a community where you will be allowed, like where it will be permitted, because these are extremely polluting facilities. They pollute the air through just like the particles of feces that get into the air. They pollute the soil, obviously. They pollute groundwater. And so, and this is well known at this point. And so when there's a proposal for one of these facilities to be built, if they're trying to go into a community where people are actively involved with what happens in their community, then it's going to get shut down. And that's what happens. It gets shut down, but when you target more, marginalized communities where people are poorer, communities where communities of color, now you're dealing with folks who may not even have the time to to put in that kind of effort to do all this research and find out all these things, and and organize together and shut down these facilities. And that's what's been happening historically, is that these folks have these folks who are building these industrial agricultural operations, animal agricultural operations, they just realize historically that there aren't as many barriers to them opening their facilities when they target low income indigenous communities, low income Latinx communities, low income Black communities. And so that's why they end up building in those types of rural areas, because by the time people realize the impacts to their health, to their water systems, to their overall quality of life, it's already too late. The facility is built, and now the community itself is going to have to suffer the consequences.
Well, I think that leads right into the next question, which is there a coincidence that industrial animal farming, slaughtering, and processing facilities tend to be built in low-income rural communities of color?
Right. So, and let's not just, focus only on the industrial, like, animal raising facilities, because there's also the processing facilities, which oftentimes are targeting undocumented workers. There's facilities that actually set up vans at the border to just pick up the workers as they come over, and drive them directly to the slaughterhouse to get started on work. And you can find out more about that information at the Food Empowerment Project website. It's an amazing organization that is doing great work in exposing these kinds of issues around workers' rights violations, and exposing the animal agriculture industries for, like, the foul stuff that they're doing. And so, and they have such a high turnover rate in these slaughterhouses because it's awful work. And that's one of the things that we oftentimes don't consider when we're just walking into a grocery store and grabbing, a packet of meat off the shelf. It's very sanitized. It's a very easy thing to do when you have the privilege to just walk in after everything is said and done and purchase this meat. But the slaughterhouse industry has one of the highest turnover rates, has one of the highest rates of suicide, because, whether we want to admit it or not, killing animals over and over and over and over again, day after day after day, as your job, is extremely detrimental to anybody's mental health. And so we don't want to factor that into our consumption of these products and what it means to the workers who have to do this work, who don't have any other options but to do this work oftentimes because they're specifically being targeted by these industries. And then you have, like, the packing plants. And I was just doing some research right here in Baltimore, and about 99% of the meat packing plants, again, they are located in marginalized, in low-income Black communities. These huge plants, they're, putting out all this pollution all day long. They are, the workers are engaged in this really unpleasant work, unsafe work. And that's another thing that you can learn about on the Food Empowerment Project website, foodispower.org, is just how dangerous this work is, the line speeds, the amount of output that the workers have to do in order to just like process these animal parts. And so like it all kind of feeds into each other. And it's no coincidence again that these kinds of facilities are going to be not only built around poor people of color, but also be bringing in poor people of color to do this horrendous work, because oftentimes we just have to have a job and don't have a whole lot of choices. And so yeah, like again, no coincidence whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that, hearing the title of this session, the animal agriculture agenda, it may seem like just, a phrase that might be attention grabbing, but what you're describing here is like a very multi-layered, targeted approach to these vulnerable populations. And so you have to be on high alert basically when you're dealing with this. And so I think that now we've talked a bit about the impact of the animal agriculture industry in these rural marginalized communities. The next question is that talks about your work more specifically. Your work is centered in inner city environments. Are there environmental issues created by our food system in those areas as well?
There are, but it takes a bit of, um, I don't know, like sort of mental acrobatics to see it that way, because we inner city communities, low income urban communities are just kind of ignored and excluded from most conversations. And I'm talking about from environmental conversations. I'm talking about from, animal rights conversations. I'm talking about from even, I mean, public health is a little bit better because there is quite a bit of focus in public health on the effects, the detrimental effects of eating certain foods, which is the foods that are available in marginalized communities of color. And so luckily, there's more attention being paid to these communities around public health, but in terms of what the environment is in these communities, and what environment is being created in these communities, this is where I work. This is where I grew up. This is what I know. And so, I talk extensively about these environments. I write about these environments. I do, PowerPoint presentations where I have photos of these environments, one of which is like the background photo here on the screen. It, this is the environment that people are raising their children in, generation after generation, and sort of forced into because poverty is on purpose. And so, these food companies are specifically targeting um, these low-income marginalized communities with the most climate unfriendly food available. And I want to also talk about plant-based food in terms of it being climate friendly food, and that is just the truth. Like nobody is disputing anymore that that eating a predominantly plant-based, fully plant-based diet is far more climate friendly than having this focus on the animal agriculture industries as the basis for the food system. And I mean, the World Health Organization, all these like legitimate studies are now out there that are saying, look, the plant-based diet is more climate friendly. We need to shift more towards a more climate friendly diet. Well, guess who is not getting that memo? People who are living at the furthest margins of society. That is just the truth. And so, as food justice activists, as environmental justice activists, it's the job of people like me and others to go into these spaces where none of this information is making it, and and teaching people and disseminating this information that we have other options. And and when we don't have other options, when folks don't have other options, then we just make a way. We create those options. We create the path to the option to engage with more climate friendly foods. And it's not easy work and it oftentimes is not very pleasant work because you have the whole food system and you have, just like whole structures and institutions that are working directly against you, trying to do this work, not to mention big corporations that are directly benefiting from these foods that are being dumped into these communities. And so I argue, and I may be the only person who argues right now, that these packaged food companies, these unhealthy food companies, these fast food companies that are coming in and specifically targeting these low income communities of color are creating an environment that is detrimental to people's overall health and well-being, and so therefore it is also a form of environmental racism.
I think that that's a really compelling argument because, especially over the last decade, we've seen so much discussion and activism around the fact that like the wealth gap is growing larger and larger. And so the amounts of people who are borderline or falling into these disenfranchised and marginal groups is growing larger and larger. And so if large corporations can keep a stronghold on the masses of people, by restricting access to the foods that are going to help us have a sustainable future, then I mean it's pretty like diabolical for real. Like so yeah, I think that that's an amazing thesis that you put forth, and I look forward to seeing more discourse around this topic going forward. So my next question for you is, in light of all of the issues that you've raised, what kinds of work is currently being done in mainstream food justice communities to address issues around food access, and is that work sustainable?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So it's interesting, Jessica. It's really interesting. Because as a person who is coming into the food justice community through a plant-based food lens, and I would even dare say through a vegan lens. Dun dun dun. She said the V word. Um, you know, it it it's really interesting. You have to choose to either be quiet and and just go along to get along, but anybody who knows me just kind of knows that that's not really my thing. And so I'm going to speak up on these issues, and then I'm going to be seen as like the person that's constantly speaking up on these issues, constantly bringing them to the forefront. And we have to focus on, more than ever, we have to focus on like really promoting these climate friendly foods, these climate friendly ways of eating. And because it can't just be wealthy white folks, or like the middle class folks, suburban folks who are like on the like environmental train and doing their part. Like everybody is going to have to do their part in order for us to turn this thing around, to turn this ship around, so to speak. We are heading towards catastrophe. We are already experiencing so many of the effects of climate change right now. And it's like, if this information isn't making it into the communities at the furthest margins, if this work isn't being done in those communities to create a pathway to enable folks to be able to eat more climate friendly, then I mean, all of it is for nothing. It's like these communities are continually ignored as if they don't exist by everybody, politicians, activists, everybody. And so it's time to stop discarding people. It's time to stop discarding communities and stop acting like we don't need all of us. And so yeah, the current work that's being done, some of it is great. There are folks who are on the ground working on making sure that low income folks have access to more fresh fruits and veggies through community farmers markets, for instance, through being able to access them with their WIC benefits, or public assistance benefits. And that's really, really important work, especially, making seedlings now available to purchase with food stamps, right? That was something that wasn't done before a few years ago, where you can actually buy a tomato plant with your food stamps, take it home, put it in a pot, in a pot, and grow that on your balcony, right? So these are all important baby steps, and I applaud them. But then, we also have folks who are trying to expand access to, like, chickens, backyard chickens, so that folks can have access to the eggs, and folks can have access to the meat. And now even some talk around being able to keep goats in backyards for milk and for slaughter. And it, like, that's not, on the one hand, these folks feel like, hey, it's food, and we want people to have access to food. And so, like, let's get them food. And it's very, it's not very circumspective. It's not taking all of these things into consideration. And then another thing that irks the hell out of me, to be honest, is this attitude within the mainstream food justice activism communities, that poor people of color aren't going to want to eat plant-based. Like, they're not going to want to change their diets. They're not going to want to do anything different. It's just this infantilization of entire communities that, as far as I'm concerned, is just racist. It is just like assuming that people within these communities, once they know that there is another alternative, that they just won't do it. And it's gross. And I speak out about that every time I see it, because my experience has been anything but that. Once people know that these things are going on, once people know how detrimental our current animal-based food system is to the environment, once they know how bad it is for their health, once they know the impact that the animal agriculture industry is having, even globally, in terms of impacting indigenous communities all the way across the globe, they do care. They are appalled. And the first question is, well, what can I do? And so just, treat everybody like they have the same capacity to learn and to want to change once they know that there's another alternative. And so, I have my fair share of frustration in doing food justice work in these mainstream spaces, because there's such a just kind of resistance to doing something that is looked at as just too drastic. That's just too much, baby steps. We can't expect too much of people. And meanwhile, the planet is burning. The coasts are flooding. There's droughts. There's like, we don't have time. And I know from personal experience that folks will change once they understand that there's even an option for change, or that things are as bad as they are. And so, if folks aren't ready to do something drastic in a crisis situation, then they need to step aside and let people who are ready to do something drastic take over. And that's just how I feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, based off what you're describing, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in these mainstream food justice movements to really be attentive and responsive to the concerns and needs of the populations that they're working with in these marginalized communities. Because, I mean, so many studies are showing and projections are showing that, the most marginalized, impoverished communities are going to experience the most severe impacts of climate change in the US and globally. And by the time they're experiencing these severe impacts of climate change, more likely than not, the situation is going to be pretty far gone for everybody else too. And so, like, really seeing everyone as partners in this is really the only way to have any substantive and sustainable change in this movement. So thank you for your insights on that. Next up for our question is, why is it especially important now for us to transition to more plant-based eating?
Yeah, so just looking at plant-based eating from the perspective of being climate friendly, if for no other reason, and lots of people, are looking at it from the perspective of public health, that just something as simple as making the majority of the food on your plate be plant foods is going to be a healthier option than like the current plate setup. So that's already kind of something that is being talked about in public health spaces. Doctors have been telling us, for God knows how long, like eat more fruits and vegetables. Even when, you come in for heart problems, high blood pressure, whatever, eat more fruits and vegetables, right? So, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Um, but just expanding those conversations into this environmental justice space, um, we are talking a food system that is more climate friendly, that is less um, damaging to our environment. And then, of course, making sure that this plant based food system is looking at its own environmental impacts and work impacts on workers and and that kind of thing. And so because we as people who eat a plant-based diet, we as vegans, right, we're not we're also complicit in certain ways in some pretty problematic uh aspects of even plant agriculture, right? There's still, if you're talking about industrial agriculture, you're still talking about soil erosion, you're still talking about, deforestation, you're still talking about, worker rights violations. And so we need to look at, okay, how can we clean up our act? Um, as well, and how can we make sure that the choices that we're making are not only more climate friendly but just like more socially conscious as well.
Yeah.
So we have to change. We can't not change. When it was when it was just about you know uh the animals, right? It was like, we gotta stop hurting animals. So many people were like, whatever. Some people, a certain percentage of people are like, oh, wow, that's what we're doing to animals right now. Like, that is horrendous, right? And then those of us who felt like it was horrendous what's happening to animals and within the animal based food system, um, made the change like immediately because it was just like, I don't want to be complicit in harming these creatures, right? But that's such a small percentage, unfortunately. And then there's folks who are really engaging because of the health impacts of generationally eating these unhealthy animal products, and so that's a bigger group, right? And that's great that folks are sort of flocking more to plant-based eating because of the health benefits that have been proven. um, but now we're talking about having a planet, not having a planet, like we're having children, people are having, somebody's pregnant right now, right? And
Mhm.
so like if you're gonna go so far as to reproduce um on this planet and then turn around and not be concerned about whether or not there is going to be a livable environment for those children to grow up on, for those children's children to grow up on, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. Like it, yes, it's not all about our personal choices. Like me eating beans and rice every day for the rest of my life is not going to reverse the effects of animal agriculture on this planet, or of oil extraction, or of plastics, or of logging, right? It's just a thing that I can do, that each one of us can do on an individual basis. But it's about changing, it's about shifting the culture and shifting the paradigm, and that's really, really important. And that starts with education, that starts with going into these spaces where this information just hasn't reached yet, and just letting people know, like, this is the situation. You didn't know, I did, there was a time when I didn't know, there's a lot of people who still don't know. but now so what are we all going to do? And so that is where we are. And it's no longer an option. Like, we have to shift dramatically very quickly, or it's about to get really, really bad. And so while there's still a window, I think that it's our responsibility to do so.
Yes, and we do still have access to that window. So let's let's take advantage of the opportunity to change our ways as opposed to being forced and whatever comes with forced change, as opposed to the change that we embrace.
That's
The,
right.
the next question is, what kinds of things can people in their communities do to create a more climate friendly food system?
Yeah, I think that the main thing, the biggest, I think, impact that we can do at the community level is to bring our food more to a local level, right? Because right now, like, we are just shipping food all over this planet, right? The food that's in the grocery store might be from Ecuador or Peru or China or wherever. Um that is having such a huge impact. All of that transportation is just having such an impact on our environment. And so I think it's just, creating local food systems, it just checks so many boxes. And that's the thing that's so exciting for me. It checks so many boxes. It not only, are you cutting back on the transportation damage, right? The CO2 emissions from transporting this food across the country and even across the world, but now you are working within your community, and especially when you're talking about low income communities of color, folks who are living at the furthest margins, who have the least power over their food systems. Now they're starting to take some of that power back. So doing things like just planting some herbs, some culinary herbs on your windowsill. Getting a couple of pots or containers to plant some things on your balcony or outside your window, on your front stoop, right? And then you start, and that just is like at a personal, like, family level. You can engage with your kids and other folks within your household with that, and sort of it can become like a learning process, as well as just taking back that tiny little bit of control over what food you're consuming and where it's coming from. And then you can expand out from there. And, like, especially in Baltimore, we have all these vacant lots. Just in some communities, there's more vacant lots than than actual occupied homes, row homes. And so, just like we even have programs here in the city, like adopt a lot programs, which I have personally um, utilized when I was living in the Penn North community in Baltimore, where you can adopt like an abandoned lot in Baltimore, and then you clear it because it's going to be a dump site. So you clear it, you get together with some family, some friends, some other community members, you clear it, and you do raised beds, container gardening, that kind of thing. And now it's like a coming together of the community, in a way that, again, is taking back control of your food system in a an expanded way. But it's also like communing with other people. It's spending time with other people. It's getting to know other people. When we were building the Penn North Garden, it was, I got to know people, like things about people that I didn't even know. And these were folks who were living in the same community as me, who I passed on the street, multiple times a day sometimes. And, just working together, camaraderie, like that kind of thing, while also taking back control of a little bit more of your food system. And then, like, if your community is doing that and another community adjacent is doing that and another community adjacent is doing that, now you have a situation where, maybe folks can get together and start like a little community farmers market, right? Where like we're gonna have our stuff, and it can be like a food share, right? Where it's like there's no, monetary value put on these fruits and vegetables. It's just like, oh, hey, we have, some eggplant and you have some green beans and, you have some cucumbers, let's like trade, which is beautiful. And I just love that. And then, we can start talking about now incorporating like bringing some economic stability into a community, which we know that a lot of the issues that folks have in these low income communities like sort of are rooted in economic marginalization. So figuring out how to like use your labor in this beautiful thing that you're doing to like bring in some economic stability into your community. So there's things like that. Connecting with food distribution companies outside the community that are willing to donate surplus produce to the community. That's one thing. And folks will be surprised at how willing these corporations, because we look at them as like evil corporation, and I'm like, yeah, they are, but at the same time, like they want to look like they're not evil, right? So oftentimes they'll do things like donate surplus food. I mean, the other option is to not have so much surplus food, but like they're not gonna do that. So they will set up a donation where like their driver, who already is driving around to, this grocery store and that convenience store and that market or whatever, they'll just drop off at a location in a community. And now you can start setting up like food giveaways of, of surplus foods. And now you're really, you're addressing the needs of the most marginalized folks, the seniors on a fixed income, houseless individuals, single parents, who are working multiple jobs, things like that. And so it really, there's just so many possibilities, when talking about creating avenues to more planet friendly foods. And, I am just so excited to be engaging in this work because, basically it's all happening under the radar. Again, people don't care what is happening in low income Black and brown communities. Like they don't, they don't care about us. They really don't. And so this is an opportunity to like, to really mobilize and work together to begin to, brainstorm some solutions to these pressing problems, and hopefully come out of it with a plan that will be that'll be beneficial to our environment in the long run. So it'll benefit everybody.
I love all the ideas that you just shared, because not only do they emphasize the importance of like reconnecting to where your food comes from and being empowered by that, but also making connections with people in your community, and through that communal work, encouraging shifts that can transform those communities. And I also really love that, your insights are really pointing to like the way that we were in connection with our food maybe like 2 or 3 generations ago. So this is not like, it's not groundbreaking in that we have to figure out some brand new system. This is somewhat intuitive to how we have been in touch with our food for a very long time. And so it's just a matter of like recognizing the weaknesses in the current system. Just because it's new or corporate or huge doesn't mean it's better by any means. And it doesn't mean it serves more people. In fact, it's leaving more people out. So I love these suggestions. And Brenda, if you're open to it, we can take 1 or 2 questions from the people who are watching the video. Is that cool?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So folks, if you have any questions for Brenda, please drop them in the comments right now, and I will come to those while I wrap up with the final question that I have for Brenda. And so my last question for you, Brenda, is how can people support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. So few people ask that question. Unfortunately, I get interviewed a lot, and it's not very often that I get that question. But before I talk about how people can support me, I want to say that what people should definitely be doing is supporting their local food justice activists. So wherever you are, whatever city you're in, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some people in like some, I don't know, like Scottish village that are watching this right now. I don't know what your situation is with the food justice work that's happening there, but like if you like live in a city, or if you live, you know, in a rural community in the US, or like in the West, um there's somebody doing food justice work, because there are food justice issues that, I mean, this system is just so dysfunctional. The current food system is so dysfunctional. So there are people being exploited, there are people being excluded, there are people being harmed at every stage of food production and distribution. And so there's somebody doing the work. So find out who the folks are locally who are doing the work and support that work. And if by some weird chance there is nobody doing that work, then yeah, like jump out there and start, you know, and start small. Start, you know, with one of the smaller projects that I was talking about. Like, don't just jump right out there and try to do what we're doing, because we don't sleep. So you know, like this is a sacrifice right here. But you know, so go in and find those folks who are doing that work, or start small, and start at community centers, start at local festivals, start, you know, contacting food distribution companies that might be willing to make donations, and then set up a donation site and give away produce, and also give away information. You know, make a like little one page flyer about more climate friendly foods, and pass that out with the bags of produce that you pass out. Like, just be creative and have fun with it. Um and 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 so yeah, and there's folks all across the country who are doing food sovereignty work, food justice work, who are working, a lot of us who are in frontline communities, you know, the communities of color, the BIPOC communities that are being impacted the most by the climate crisis. There's a lot of us out there that are doing this work in our own ways. So yeah, find those folks and support them and connect with them. And then, you know, there are ways to connect with me, obviously, like on social media, although I'm not all that active on social media. Like, I have spurts. You'll see, like, I'll have a spurt where it's just like, oh man, she's putting out this great content, and then nope, it's over. That's done for like several months. And you know, that's just how it is with my work cycle. But you know, like, I have a Patreon, which is where people, I have a group of folks who just try to make sure I eat and survive. So that is very much appreciated, especially during, you know, this pandemic. It's been life-saving for me. And so it's just like patreon.com, and it's just my name, Brenda Sanders. But connect with me. I think I am Vegan Food Justice on Instagram. I am Vegan Queen Bee on Twitter. And then I'm on Clubhouse now, so that's cool. And yeah, and then just like Brenda at Afro-Vegan-Society.org. If you just want to hit me up, you know, and just email me, you can reach me that way. So that's how I'm reachable.
Well, this whole conversation has been wonderful, Brenda. And just, I'd like to say it's been so awesome working with you over the past year and engaging in this work, serving our communities. And so, yes, we have so much more work to do, and so happy to be led under your leadership. And thank you.
Oh my goodness. So
Yes.
did anybody have any questions? Or did I just answer everybody's questions?
And you really did. A lot of the questions or conversation was related to things you were talking about. I mean, you covered a lot of bases in a short period of time. So yes, for people who were not familiar, I feel like they see some connections now that they didn't see before.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So, yes, thank you so much to everyone to tuning in to this live Q&A with Brenda. And let us know in the comments if you want more of these, because there's so many topics I'm sure that Brenda can educate us all on based off her experiences and her amazing knowledge and research skills. So, um, and thanks for, participating in Afro-Vegan Society's Earth Day event this year, another virtual event on the books, and looking forward to engaging in new ways virtually and hopefully in person at some point. Thank you all, and we will see you next time.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you. Bye.